Hello and welcome to Krachtwerker Interviews. Today we've got Anthony Olinger from Xylem Handmade Basses and Guitars from Durango, Colorado, USA. This is straight from their website. Xylem instruments are custom made to your specifications and built to last for generations. They are crafted to withstand thousands of gigs and designed to maximize your comfort and ease of playability, so you may realize the full potential of your musical abilities. When playing your Xylem instrument, you will experience the craftsmanship, care and attention to detail that goes into each one, making your playing feel effortless. Not to mention you're playing a really beautiful bass or guitar. But without any further waiting, here is Anthony.
Anthony speaking.
Anthony, hello, it's Helmut here. How are you doing?
Very good. How are you, Helmut?
I am great. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I thought it's much nicer to have something to go with the text version, a video or audio format. We only did the first one a couple of weeks ago with VFE pedals. It went really great. So I was wanting to do the same today with yourself. And basically, I would just like to run through the questions that we that you answered in the form already. You know.
Terrific. That sounds great. Hey, I don't use Skype very often, so let me know if I need to increase or decrease the levels on my microphone, that kind of thing.
No, the sound is great. It's all good. It's all good.
Excellent. Excellent.
So where do we start? I've been your basses definitely are. I was thinking to myself, I just can't see a punk band playing your basses and guitars somehow, unless they have got really rich mummies and daddies. Am I right?
Well, yeah, probably. They start around $1,800, which I think is reasonable for a fully custom instrument. But yes, you're right. You're probably not going to be getting too many young punk bands playing my stuff for that reason.
So could you give us a quick introduction, who you are, where you are, and maybe an idea of what got you started in this game?
Sure. Yeah, my name, again, my full name is Anthony Olinger. I own and operate Xylem Basses and Guitars. We're located in Durango, Colorado in the United States. And Durango is in the very southwestern corner of the state. We're right in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. It's a beautiful place to be, and the climate's really good for building instruments out here. It's very consistent and it's relatively dry, which, in my opinion, is kind of the easier climate in which to build instruments. I got started back in college. It was around I started playing bass in about 2002, and I got into building basses around the very end of 2004. I started playing bass because I was a huge Primus fan. The first few times I saw Les Claypool play live, I kind of, it kind of sold me on playing the bass. I got real excited about it. A few years later, of course, being a Primus fan, I was trying to learn all kinds of Primus songs. I was trying to learn John the Fisherman on a 5-string PV bass that I had at the time, and it was a 35-inch scale, which is kind of long for my fingers. I got like a medium, hand size and everything like that. So I was going to try to get a short scale bass like Les Claypool, like his 4-string. He's got a 32-inch 4-string. And I couldn't find anything for less than $1,000-$2,000, which just wasn't going to happen on the money I was making in college. I was paying for college with scholarships and paying my own way. Other than that, all my expenses. So looking back on it was kind of a crazy decision a little bit, but it did seem to work out. So anyway, I tried to, I just decided to build a bass. I was like, hey, I'll give it a shot. If it works, great. If not, that's fine. Started building one in my apartment, decided to approach one of my professors about getting elective credit for building an instrument. Ended up getting 1 college credit. The bass came out very nicely. Relatively speaking, it's certainly not top of the line by my current standards, but it sounded great and it was pretty playable. So I finished that bass about 2 weeks before I graduated with my bachelor's degree in zoology, and at the end of that, I was kind of like, wow, building instruments is really fun. Maybe this is what I want to do. So I kind of have been building ever since then. I managed a music store outside of Chicago for a few years after college, and saved up some money to launch the business and learned more about the whole field, the whole profession, working in the music store, and launched Xylem in early 2008 officially, and been building basses ever since.
Did that experience in the shop give you some idea of what people are actually looking for? Did that help in kind of deciding how and features, look, design of the basses?
You're asking how did I settle on the features and the design I was going to offer?
No, I was just thinking that if you're working in a guitar shop for a while, you probably, a lot of talking goes on in there. Lots of people walk in, talk. So you probably got some ideas of what you want your basses to be when you actually start them.
Yeah, I did. It certainly was helpful in a lot of ways. I got to do a lot of. Sort of just managed the front end of the store. We had a lot of sheet music in the back, and then all the guitars and accessories and stuff up in the front. And so I got to do several setups and guitar repairs and all that kind of stuff for a while. And yeah, like you said, there was plenty of talking and BSing back and forth about about the subject. I guess I don't think I gained a lot in terms of what I thought I should offer people as a result of that. I learned a lot more about I didn't have a real good idea of what a Stratocaster was and what pickup configuration it had, or what pickups were in a P bass versus a J bass and where they were and all that stuff. So I learned a lot about what was already out there, what a little bit about what people liked and didn't like in terms of sound and things like that. So mostly what I learned at the music store was some repair stuff and like I said, what was already out there in terms of the brands and the configurations and things like that. I kind of always had it in my head from the first day to kind of make instruments that were a little bit out there. Since I was such a fan of Les Claypool, I obviously, found out about Carl Thompson's basses. And I knew I wanted to do something kind of similar to that. So in my head, I always kind of had the idea to make everything custom. So yeah, that's I learned some from the music store. It was definitely invaluable, but less about. I was kind of hard-headed about what I wanted to offer. I didn't really compromise on that too much until a little bit later down the road when I realized that it was a good thing to compromise and really give people exactly what they're looking for in every instrument I make.
Do you make any in advance for sale, or is it pretty much all of it done on request?
I do make a few in advance for sale. I currently am in Chicago Music Exchange. They generally want me to have. They generally want 1 to 3 basses at a time in their store. Same with Rudy's Music in New York. They want a couple of basses at a time whenever I can get them there. And usually when I make instruments for those stores. I'll kind of ask them what they think they want in terms of pickup configuration and woods and shape and all that kind of stuff, just to try to design it so that it'll sell as fast as possible once it gets there and hits the price point that the store wants to hit. So those are, and that's maybe at the moment, that's maybe only 10 or 15% of what I'm doing are the instruments for stores. I got a lot of orders just from individual people. I'm actually backed up with orders until about March of 2017 right now, and that's including instruments for stores and instruments for customers. Having said all of that, I will be developing a standard model or two before too long, hopefully in the next couple of years, and I hope to make, 5 to 10 of those at a time and send them all out to stores. So we'll have a little bit more equal ratio of instruments in stores and custom ordered instruments for just individuals.
Well, it was actually you leading me into a question there, which was if that is the case, then I would imagine that you would probably want to expand, or maybe you can get some more people in, keep a close eye on their quality and stuff like that. Is that something that's on the cards?
I'm kind of wrestling with that decision. I have been for the last 3 years or so, whether or not to have apprentices or full-on employees who would be, luthiers of similar skill level as to mine. On the one hand, like you said, yeah, I could certainly expand and shorten that waiting list significantly if I had some people working with me. At the same time, unfortunately I'm pretty obsessive in that kind of thing. So it's going to be, if I do ever decide to do that, it's going to be hard for me to let go of any particular process in building the instruments and put it in the hands of somebody else, because I lose a lot of sleep about whether X, Y, and Z is good enough, whether it's from a functional standpoint or a cosmetic standpoint. So I haven't quite decided. I'm sort of thinking about when the standard models roll out. I'm gonna see what I can do. That'll be a lot easier than making everything custom like I currently do, because I can jig out everything and probably get a CNC machine for doing all that stuff. So ideally I'd like to start. Ideally, I'd like to just keep it myself if I can, but if I just get buried in too many orders or it really looks like it's advantageous to expand, I probably will consider expanding down the road. But long answer short, I guess ideally I'd like to keep it just me and hopefully greatly increase my speed somehow.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Yeah, we'll see. It's maybe in the works to have some employees down the road.
You just gave me an idea for one of your basses, for a name for one of your basses.
Oh, yeah?
You can call it OCD.
I could. Really, the middle name of each one could probably be OCD at this point. But yeah,
All right.
yeah, I maybe should do that at some point. Maybe a really, really fancy, maybe the best one, in the next 5 years, I'll name that one OCD.
Have you ever built one that said, no, I'm not selling this?
Say it again.
Have you ever built one and thought to yourself, no, you're not selling it, it's too nice?
Oh, for it being too nice? Not quite yet. It is usually hard to pack them up and send them away though after I finish them and test play them a little bit. I'm kind of sad letting it go for sure. But every one that I let go, it just gives me I think the only reason that I can let them go is every single one I do let go means I get to build some more and make them that much better next time. So yeah, it is tough, but I'm usually happy enough to let them go so I can start on the next ones.
Okay, so I see this is a full-time operation. Has this been like this from the start? I mean, is it? I know this is a silly question, but you sound as if business is good, basically.
It is pretty good. I don't make a ton of money because I'm still in the embryonic stage of my business and still developing everything. But it has been it's been 50 hours a week or more since day one, basically. In the first couple of years, 2008 through 2010, I would occasionally do a little bit of website work on the side for some close friends and that kind of thing. And I always take repair work, if someone's got a Stratocaster they want set up or have fret work done to it, that kind of thing. I usually take that kind of work, which helps me pay the bills. But other than that little bit of side work in the early days of the website side work in the early couple of years, it's been full time. Otherwise, I've been very lucky to have some support support from some friends who helped me out with some business decisions and that sort of thing along the way. But I've been very fortunate to be I almost always have orders on hand
Yeah,
to build. I've rarely had a time where I didn't.
that's good. So you build websites too then?
Well, I learned how to I learned how to build websites mainly to launch Xylem basses and guitars. That was kind of my plan from the beginning, was to market everything online as much as possible. I thought it was a great idea because your website's basically a permanent employee that's everywhere at once throughout the world, as long as there's a computer there and works 24 hours a day for you. So I was really thought that was the way to go. So I learned relatively thoroughly at the time how to make a basic website and how to get high rankings on Google, and I kind of developed my skills as time went on. My first website definitely didn't look as good as the
Did it
current
have flying
website.
toasters on it and stuff like that?
Yeah. It wasn't quite a 90s website like that, but it was close. It didn't have the ugly color scheme, but it was pretty simple and not quite as professional as I wanted it to
Yeah.
look at first. But anyway, to answer your question, that's basically how I got started building websites. By the time I had got my first couple of revisions of the Xylem website up, I was kind of like, wow, I actually know pretty well how to do this stuff. So I leveraged that a little bit when I needed some extra cash in those first couple of years.
So how did the first couple of how did you get your first few basses sold? I can imagine that's quite a hard thing to do. You start out in something like this. There's so much choice out there. There's cheap stuff. There's expensive stuff. There's so many luthiers out there now. So many custom builders. I mean, how do you think you managed to get those first, let's say, 5 or 10 off the shelf?
Well, it was, you're right, it was a little bit tricky. I was self-taught, so the first three instruments I built had some minor flaws. The second one wasn't quite balanced the way that I would have liked it to, or liked it to be balanced. Same with the third one. The third one was a six-string fretless. It didn't quite balance in sitting position. The first two instruments that I ever built, I still own. I actually still am playing the second instrument I ever built because I haven't had time to build one for myself since. I'm actually going to build a new one for myself in the next couple of rounds of instruments here. But so I kept the first two. I haven't sold them at all yet, and I kind of want to keep them for sentimental values. The third one I had on hand when I got my first official order from somebody. They had seen, it was a friend of a photography studio that had seen some pictures of my work, and they ordered one from me outright at that point. So I had that one. That was the first one I sold. And then my third and fifth instruments I had just made for stores, and they were a little bit off the wall, and I had to sell them for a little bit cheaper than I wanted to. I think they both went for about $1,000. Sold one of them at Bass Club Chicago, and the other one at Avenue N Music, also in Chicago. And those took probably eight months or so to sell. And like you said, it was I was definitely intimidated. I was going into the stores and asking, I just basically walk in after calling them to make sure that they had time to talk to me, and try to see if they put my instruments on consignment. That was the way I didn't sell them directly to the stores. We did a consignment type situation where they took a percentage when it sold.
Yeah.
After I sold those first several instruments, though, that was about the time that I got backed up with orders that I couldn't keep up with my orders from individuals, and I got approached by Jocko 3X to be one of my endorsing artists, and he got me into Chicago Music Exchange. So after those first five, it was relatively easy. You know, some of the instruments, you know, sat in the store for 6 months to 12 months, but they eventually moved. So yeah, it was tough getting started. I sold things for less than I probably should have, which was advantageous in getting people in the door and expanding my portfolio. But after I had several under my wing, people started to see that what I was doing was pretty decent quality. So I started just being able to work and wait for the orders to roll in at that point.
Okay. So I think these are, to me, the very interesting questions. Who inspired? We kind of actually answered that already. Who inspires you? Who do you look up from a musical point of view? So not just from a building point of view, but also from a musical point of view. What kind of bands do you listen to, for example?
I have I have pretty eclectic tastes. Back in the day, right when I first got into building instruments, I was actually I was kind of a jerk about it. I was kind of stuck up about what I thought was cool and what I thought was stupid. And you know, I listened to Primus's album Anti-Pop all the time, and that's kind of who I was. You know, I was the anti-pop kid that everyone rolled their eyes at. You know, when I started talking about my opinions on music and how it should be, it was very narrow and kind of ignorant, frankly. Since then, my tastes have opened up significantly. I'll listen to almost anything, you know, from country to dubstep and electronica stuff. The old version of me would be very disappointed at my current musical tastes, I would imagine.
Roll his eyes at you.
Yeah, he would. He'd be like, "Oh, I can't believe I've become this." But having said all of that, you know, to give you an idea, I've been listening to that band Churches a lot lately. They spell churches with a V instead of a U. I really am enjoying that band a lot. They're kind of, you know, electronica and less on the hard side than like your dubstep type stuff. At the same time, I listen to, and anyone listening to this interview, I highly recommend that you check out a guy named Bob Log the Third. He's a one-man band that plays a baritone guitar, and he's very off the wall, very unique in his sounds. I guess I'd call him blues rock. That's kind of off the wall. At the same time, I'm really into.
Is it the bassist version of C6 Steve?
Oh, I don't know who C6 Steve is.
I should Google that. You should Google that. Yeah,
I
for sure.
certainly will. Thank you. I'm always on the lookout for that kind of stuff. Yeah, I still listen to Primus. I really like that band. Tosin Abasi's band. You know, I honestly can't remember if I think his band is called Animals as Leaders, but that might be an album title. I'm pretty sure it's Animals as Leaders, but the main name that always hits me is Tosin Abasi. He's that guitarist that plays 7, 8, 9 string guitars and does all kinds of. He mixes classical styles with metal and does all kinds of two-hand tapping and double thumb techniques and that kind of thing. He's very inspiring. I'm really liking what he's doing these days. So that's just a little. I'm always on, like I said, I'm always on the lookout for new stuff too, and learning to expand my own horizons musically. So I'll listen to almost anything these days. Those are kind of my current favorites.
Do you think that greatly influences what you're building?
Gosh, does it
sound-wise? You know, what the kind of sounds you're trying to get, what you're trying to get your bass to sound. I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot about the bass. I mean, you build the guitars as well, but it seems as if you, correct me if I'm wrong, as if you do concentrate more on the bass side of things.
I do, and that's mostly just because I get more bass orders than I do guitar orders. It seems like the guitar audience is looking for a little bit more standardized stuff. Either that or their tastes are just a little bit more conservative. But yeah, I probably build 3 basses to one guitar, and that's mostly just a matter of, you know, that's who I get the orders from, is the bass players. Guitars are, in my opinion, they're actually slightly easier to build because you've got less length on that neck to control. There's a lot of guys are looking for extra long scale basses these days, and you kind of got to watch out for how the neck reacts to that much tension, string tension. But to answer your question about whether the bands influence how I build the basses. I'm not sure if they do. Most of what influences me when I build an instrument is what the customer wants. I'm a lot more concerned with what they would like to achieve. I really want when they pull the bass out of the box for the very first time and play it, I really want it to fit their tastes better than any instrument they've ever played before. So I usually listen real close to each customer and kind of do things a certain way based on what they want, and I really try to figure out what they want and make sure that they know what they want. There's a lot of guys who are a little bit unsure about what they want even. Having said that, it does influence the next bass I'll be building for myself. I've been kind of real excited about all the different sounds and effects people can get out of their instruments these days. So I'm going to put one of those Graphtec Hexpander units in my bass that basically converts all of your bass notes into MIDI, so you can use your bass as a MIDI controller basically, and through a soft synth, and play a violin on the G string and a sax on the D string, or make your own sounds. So that's something that's influenced me a little bit from the bands I've listened to.
Very interesting. Very interesting, actually, considering looking at your basses, that you would say that. Because one of my questions was also going to be, you think you're ever going to build anything, maybe step away from the wood, for example, maybe try some other fancy new material that might come about, or some graphite or something like that?
I was just thinking about that the other day, kind of going, how can I revolutionize the design somehow? I know that's kind of a lofty, maybe even like stuck up thing to say about it. That is kind of one of my goals, is that I'm really hoping that through building a bunch of different kinds of custom instruments, I can figure out how to improve the design of the electric bass or the electric guitar significantly from where it is. So I would eventually be open to that. One of the issues with that, however, is that a lot of those different materials, at least at some point in the building process, you need kind of some different tools to work with them, which is a huge investment. So I haven't thought about that much in terms of alternate materials yet. Graphite was definitely one I had thought about. I already put graphite spars in some of my necks to increase the stiffness, that kind of thing. I've looked a little bit at, I think Hamer Guitars builds instruments with, I know they do at least aluminum fretboards, if not full-on aluminum necks. That was kind of something I was thinking about down the road. And I probably will be doing, right now I just do the Danish oil finish on all my instruments. I will be offering some kind of lacquer finish here before too long, in solid colors, tinted colors, that kind of thing. But yeah, still thinking about the alternate materials, what else I could use, especially from a conservation type standpoint. A lot of the exotic woods that people want these days, especially ebony and certain kinds of rosewood and cocobolo, are becoming more and more endangered. They're getting added to the CITES list, the what was it? Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species is the CITES list. So yes, I'd very much like to at some point, but I'm still very much deciding what I'd like to tackle on that front.
I like what you're saying here. Getting off topic, but are you a believer, non-believer, or somewhere on the fence about the whole tone wood thing then? Because I mean, the moment that you walk away from wood, you walk into this realm of, oh no, it's not wood, so the thing's going to sound like crap, or oh, it doesn't resonate as well, and all this kind of nonsense. I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, there's a lot of that on the internet at the moment.
There is. Sorry, I'll let you finish there.
Well, I mean, I don't know anything about the bass side of things. My theory is very simple. When you start playing with very heavy overdriven guitars, there's absolutely nothing left of your guitar, whatever it's built of. I'm fairly sure of that. But a nice clean bass, you know, of heavy wood with heavy strings, I can imagine that there is a certain amount of wood resonance that will come back through the strings and back through the pickups. I don't know
You
what
know,
you think about that.
I'm one of those guys, and I'm going to probably get in trouble for saying this. There's plenty of guys who are as good or better than me that will completely disagree with what I'm about to say. However, there's plenty of guys who are as good or better than me that will agree with what I'm going to say. But in my opinion and from my experience, um, the different woods you use in at least an electric instrument have a very, very subtle effect on the tone of that instrument compared to the type of strings you're using, the type of style you use to play, the scale length of the instrument, the type of pickups, where you put the pickups on the body,
Yeah.
the amplifier you're using. All of those things I feel very much have a much larger effect on the tone of an instrument, significantly more than the species of wood.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Having said that, I would imagine that this species of wood does have some kind of effect on an instrument. It seems like the denser and harder the woods, the more sustain you get out of the instrument, as long as you know there's not it seems like a Strat style tremolo saps a lot of sustain away because you
Yeah.
have to route through the whole body. um uh
Well,
and
that's kind of why I've got a problem with that whole theory, because you know it's especially some of the way the bridges actually sit in the wood. I can't imagine that they translate anything of the strings into the wood in the first place. Never mind it coming back into the strings. I mean, that was one of the things. Floyd Rose, for example. I mean, that you know, if anything goes into the body and back into the strings, I would be very very surprised. Maybe one of the tunomatics or anything that's kind of properly bolted into the wood. You know, I can imagine that. Anyway, sorry. That's
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, actually, Helmet. I feel exactly the same way that you do about that. Is I'm like, is this really? And when the bridge isn't that well attached to the wood, how much is it really doing? And not only that, but it all gets translated into the pickups too. I have to wonder if the pickups are even able to pick up on the subtlety of the different species of
yeah,
wood. I might be a little more on board with rosewood sounds like X and ebony sounds like Y. Those arguments from people. If more people did experiments that were actually at the scientific level on that kind of stuff. If they had an instrument where the only thing they had, it's even tough with two separate instruments because you can keep the bodies alder on both instruments, but that's a different piece of alder. Is it from a different tree? It's if at best it's from a different section of the same tree, which
yeah,
might have a different response. But there's very few things or very few times where guys will I did find one experiment on the internet where a guy used, I think it was, I forget the company. They made high end Stratocaster style guitars basically, and what the guy did was he recorded sound samples of the same body with a rosewood on maple neck, and then he switched the neck. And kept everything else the same to a maple on maple neck, and you listen to the sound samples of the two, and to my ear, and I like to think I have a pretty good ear, I could barely tell the difference, if at all. I'd listen to it once and I'd say, oh, okay, there's a slight difference there, and then I'd listen to it again and I'd say, well, maybe there's not a difference between the two, and then it would kind of depend on which time I listened whether or not I could hear the difference. So I thought it was very subtle. I usually tell people, when they're designing their bass that I'm going to build for them, I say, I give them the same spiel I just gave you, as the tone woods are kind of subtle in my opinion. I'll use whatever you want for whatever reason you want. But yeah, and one final note on that. I know that Pete Hilton, who used to work for Carl Thompson and now runs his own company. I think he made a bass recently out of nothing but old skateboard blanks, like skateboard decks. He just glued it together, made the body out of plywood, basically.
Yeah.
And that bass sounded magnificent. I heard some sound samples of it and you really couldn't tell that it was a bass made out of plywood. It still sounded great. So yeah, I
Yeah,
tend to
yeah,
be less on that.
that's right. I mean, there's Perspex ones. There's a couple of companies now who recycle skateboards in that way. I've got actually one of them on the site. But there is one good reason to use wood is because you just can't beat some of it. I mean, the look of it. Flame maple, just as an example, or spalted. What's it? Is it spalted maple, the one with the nice black lines in it?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, it is
absolutely.
just
And
stunning.
I totally agree with you. That's one of the reasons I don't have any solid color instruments yet is the graying is just one of my favorite parts. It looks magnificent. It
Yeah.
really does.
So, what pisses you off, or what do you like about being a completely independent gear builder, if you like? Oh, well, the industry as well.
Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't quite say it doesn't piss me off. It's a little frustrating that there's so little progress on that tone wood front of people actually being able to come to some sort of at least nebulous scientific consensus on that. Not even frustrating. It's just more interesting, I guess, than anything.
Yeah.
One of one of the more frustrating things to me is that you put as much care and effort and time into each instrument as you do, and every once in a while you're still kind of at the whims of what the wood is going to do. It's a very inconsistent material. You can only do so much in terms of selecting a piece of wood that's going to be perfectly stable and just as stiff as you want. So sometimes you get to the end of building an instrument and there's, 10 thousandths too much relief in one direction of the neck or the other, and you got to pull the frets out and do work to the fretboard and, go back and redo all this stuff that you've kind of already done before. That is very frustrating sometimes. I mean, I always make my instruments as perfect as possible before they leave the shop, but backtracking definitely frustrates the hell out of me. I'll be swearing in the shop, when I realize I have to spend 3 more days working on something than I thought.
But you wouldn't let it out without doing it, so there you go.
Oh, certainly not. No, and that's I certainly, I'm probably more. And occasionally I'll even run into something where I should have just, my standards are a little too high and I should have just left it alone in the first place because no one except for me would have ever noticed, and it's such a small adjustment that I kind of make it ever so slightly worse than it would have been if I just left it alone originally. So that's something that is challenging and definitely pisses me off sometimes. One of my favorite things about working in this industry is just getting to learn something new every day or do something new every day. I really like being able to make custom stuff and offering that to people because occasionally you get someone with a pretty crazy cutting edge idea that you get to execute on their behalf, and you learn a lot in that process. It makes you better at what you do. And then in the future, that works or doesn't work or what the pitfalls of it are and that kind of thing. And I really like being able to speak to anyone else in the field who's willing to be collegial about things and kind of share their ideas about how to do things or why you do them a certain way. I love having those discussions with other luthiers and other builders of amps and pedals and that kind of thing. There's a lot of it's a good time to be in the industry because there's so much more variety of everything available now: strings, pickups, effects pedals. You can really people are really dialing in what you can and can't do in the field. So it's an exciting time.
Well, that's one of the reasons I actually want to do this, because I'm so interested in the subject. There's nothing I love more than playing around with the guitar and being in bands and doing these kind of things. And I didn't notice, it kind of happened without me really noticing it, how much boutique stuff is going on. And the funny thing about it is there's probably all of the people I've spoken to and all the builders, they all have some ethos to them. You know, nobody's trying to get rich. Everybody's doing this because they love it, and everybody's trying to do something new, and everybody's trying to be very good at what they do. And it kind of reminds me of all the open source kind of communities. People tend to really stick together and help each other out. There's a lot of knowledge flowing between people. It's not you know, people trying to hold all their cards close to their chest kind of thing.
Yeah, which is really wonderful. I love that, how willing so many of the current guys are to share their stuff and be kind of open source, like you're saying. Actually, just listened to a book called Innovators that was about the early days of computers and stuff like that, and they talked a lot about. They had a whole section about the open source stuff and how it helps move the entire art along, and that's really what one of the things that I want to see is, even if I'm not the one who does it, when someone approaches me and says, "Hey, you know, I'm a beginner luthier. I'd like to really get into the business. Can you know, how do you do X, Y, and Z?" As long as I've got a little bit of time to talk to them about it, I usually try to talk to them and say, "Well, this is, you know, how I do this, and this is why, and you know, here's the advantage and here's the disadvantage. You know, maybe you'll come up with a method that's even better down the road, and we'll all benefit from it because, you know, it's a better, you know, it's an easier construction process, and it'll make things cheaper, or it'll make things sound better, or that kind of thing." I really love the sharing between everybody, because we all get to share with it, and it I can certainly understand where people are coming from when they don't want to share a trade secret. It is a very competitive industry. You got to really be working hard to stay in it. And I certainly understand those people who don't want to share their proprietary stuff. But it's wonderful when they can, because then it helps advance the entire art form, I feel, and everyone gets to progress instead of just one guy for a few years.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's go straight to, you still in the band?
You know, I'm currently not. I really wish I had the time to be in a band, because man, I love playing shows, and the last band I was in is called they're still playing. They're called Diabolical Sound Platoon, and they're this pretty unique hip hop band. There's three lyricists in the band, and depending on the month that you talk to them, they've got, you know, drums and guitar and bass usually, and actually I take that back. I think for the last year or more they've had a guitarist, a bassist, a drummer, a trombonist, and a trumpet player, and a keyboard player off and on. So they're really kind of eclectic in their style. The lyricists, what they write is just, I mean, it's just poetry, and it's really unique poetry. They remind me a lot of Aesop Rock, the hip hop artist Aesop Rock, and the guy who I think he kind of discovered Aesop Rock back in the day. His name's LP as well. But I used to be the bass player for that band from about 2009 through about 2011. That was an absolute blast. We got to do all kinds of weird, creative stuff with them. We had a violinist in the band for a while. That was that was my favorite time in the band, when we had the violinist and a few other people. But I had to, because I got so busy with my bass orders and stuff, I called it a hiatus, and I really still hope it's a hiatus, but I haven't quite got to the point where I can take the time to practice enough to not be messing up on stage when we're actually playing a show. So a lot of what I've been doing lately is my girlfriend bought me a boomerang loop station about a year and a half ago, and I've been trying to sound like a whole band with that as much as possible on my own. It's been a great learning tool for sure. I've probably got, I don't know, twice as good as I used to be just by fiddling around with that thing. But yeah, I hope to be in Diabolical Sound Platoon again before too long, because I love that band. It was so much fun to play in.
Okay, very good, very good. I don't know them. I just had a quick while you were talking. I had a quick Google. This is,
Yeah,
we're across
yeah.
the pond, you know. There's a lot of things we don't know, unfortunately.
Oh, and they're not. This is probably one of the first times they'll be mentioned in any sort of audio file like this by a third party. They're pretty local to here in Durango. We have, for the size of the town, it's got to really happen in music scene. I mean, there's maybe 50,000 people in the city. I think it's more like 30,000. But we get, Victor Wooten and Bela Fleck usually come and play a show once a year. We get all kinds of big acts here. I think it's nice enough that it attracts them. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you haven't heard of Diabolical Sound Platoon, though I hope they're able to change that very soon.
Well, it's all up to the internet now,
It is.
Yeah, it's all up to the internet. I mean, I'm surprised that the people I did manage to learn from or about, and that's all thanks to Mr. YouTube and Mr. Spotify and the like. So, yeah, the world's shrinking. So that's a good thing. I think it's a really good thing. You can
Yeah,
spend
it's enabled guys like me to do without it. I probably would not be in business without the internet.
Yeah, and I also think a lot of bands actually underestimate how much traction they can get and how far-reaching they can get their music without any record deals by doing, the majority of promotion themselves via, YouTube and the likes. So
Absolutely, yeah. When I was in Diabolical Sound Platoon, I barked up that tree every single day with the band members. I was like, we should spend a year where we don't play any live shows and just make YouTube videos, because that'll reach so many more people. And we could never quite. It was tough getting that to happen because we have so many local offerings to play shows, and we had so much fun with that we just couldn't resist. So, and we never had someone who would record out of the mixer and have a live recording of them. I'm going to be making a guitar in the next round for the guitarist for Diabolical Sound Platoon. So I'm going to shoot some video of them playing. I can actually justify taking the time to do that. Since he'll be playing one of my instruments. So I'm going to try to make a couple real nice videos of a few of their live shows and post them for him soon.
well, look, you got that, and I promise I'll spread it as much as I can. No
Oh, thanks,
problems.
Helmet. They and I appreciate that quite a bit.
No, I mean this is a bit of a labor of love for me. I mean that's what it's all about, at least up to this point. The reach is growing slowly. And this is the kind of stuff. I mean, it's not just about the instruments; it's also about the bands and the music that actually, at the end of the day, gets made by it. So, this has to be promoted. Let's do.
And real quick, Helmet. On behalf of the guys like me out there, I want to thank you for running something like Crashwork. Is that how you pronounce it, Crashwork?
Well, it's a play on Kraftwerk. You know the band Kraftwerk.
I don't, unfortunately.
Kraftwerk is this 80s electronica kind of new romanticism. No, what are they actually? They're like what were they called? They're like one of the first kind of electronic bands,
Mm-hmm.
Google them too. Kraftwerk. It's German for powerworks, but Kraftwerk. I'm German by blood, so I'm pretty fluent in German. So I made it Kraftwerk, which is Krach is noise works. And I was really, I was surprised because nobody used that name. It's a genius name. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just being really.
No,
I think it's a great name
because awesome. Actually, that's really cool. That's I think that's awesome. Yeah.
The problem now is though that I wanted the actual reason I used the name is I started buying really shitty, cheap guitars, and I made them up. I made 3 up so far, and I replace. You know, you buy some cheap guitars, and they're actually pretty well made up to the finishing. They all lack the finishing. They lack nice nuts. They lack nice fretwork. They lack just that kind of aftercare just before it goes out the door. Everything else is actually usually pretty okay. So I took them and I built them up mainly just to play around with it, but also to see if I can get into. And that's where I thought so long and hard about what am I going to call these guitars that I built. And I thought, oh, fuck it, I'm gonna call it Kraftwerk, and that's it. But now it's kind of expanding because I'm now using it for the site, and I want to start. I've got probably about 10 songs that I want to record myself. It's all kind of heavy. Kind of stonery, sludgy kind of stuff, and I think that the name would work for that. So it's kind of possibly, if I have enough time in my already busy day, I would like it to be a bit of a brand of different things. You know what I mean? So.
I do, and again, thank you. You know, I wish you all the success, and as a side note, anytime you got. I can't really promote people who are directly in competition with me, but if you ever got some cool recordings or anything that you want me to share on my social media end of things, I'm more than happy to network with you and point out anything that might be of interest to any musicians. I got several thousand friends and followers and stuff like that. You know, I'm super busy, as I imagine you are, so you have to be real deliberate about it and be like, hey, Anthony, you know, share this. I'll make it happen. And again, thank you. You know, it's guys like you that help, that help guys like me and my colleagues make their business successful, and guys like you that help share our work around and get the word out.
Well, to be completely frank about that offer that you just extended, I mean, to me the most important thing at the moment is to get people like yourself onto the site in quite a complete degree. So there's enough information about you, there's interviews with you. I want to build up the YouTube channel with more interviews and more interesting stuff, especially about boutique builders, because I think that's where the interest is. People just don't have time, you know. I mean, you sometimes go through this motion and you say, hey, come get onto the site, fill in fill in the interview form, blah 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 blah, and it's actually sometimes like pulling teeth. And sometimes you think to yourself, well, geez, we're trying to do you a favor here, right? Why is nobody biting? And then you have got to be a bit realistic about it too, and you got to say, oh, well, come on, you know, people have busy lives. They're all working. They all have families. They all have 10 million things to do. I think that's really the main thing, that the only thing that I could ask for at the moment is just to spread the word, because the more stuff that goes onto the site, the more the site will, if you build it, they'll come, kind of thing. And the more that come, the more it then goes back into hopefully people like yourself, you know, the builders and the pedal builders and the amp builders. I mean, there's hundreds of them out there, and they're all, you can watch their YouTube demos and stuff. The stuff is all good gear, you know. And I would
absolutely
any day rather buy one of them than necessarily buy something off the shelf, for example.
Yeah,
Although
absolutely.
I'm forced to a bit from a point of view where sometimes finances and stuff like that. But essentially, you know, nearly everything that's coming out now is pretty decent.
It really is. Yeah, they've even, you know, I've worked on some, you know, $150 Squire guitars that I was like, wow, this is quite a bit of guitar for 150, which is kind of cool because, you know, it's hard. You don't want, you know, little Jimmy's parents can't afford $1,000 instrument. You know, they don't know if he's going to stick with it. So it's great that he can, you know, that his parents can throw down 150 and get him something that is as good as it is. I mean, there's definitely the occasional one that's a total lemon, but they're really good for the price. Yeah, like you said, they really are. And you probably heard me type in there. Helman, I went ahead and put a note to go ahead and I'll post. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Kraftwerk. I'm gonna post about the site tomorrow on my social media and try to get people to sign up. I'm friends with a lot of other luthiers, so they'll definitely see it. And going back to what you said about it being pulling teeth to get people to sign up and put their information, basically get free advertising from you.
Yeah.
It is kind of silly from one standpoint, but to be perfectly frank, I think it took me about a month to even fill out the. I had it on my to-do list for at least a month before I actually pulled the trigger on it because, yeah, like you said, we are all super busy, and I'm like, oh, I really gotta catch up on my build stuff today. I'll advertise tomorrow. So yeah, I'm guilty too. It took me a while.
No,
to
but
get
that's
it.
why I said, that's why I had to add it in the end. It's completely understandable. It is just, I mean, it's just how it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I think the other thing that would be good to get across is that, I mean, if somebody is kind of knows his story, it probably won't take him that long to fill in an interview for him. And if he's then absolutely prepared to spend, well, this is the second interview I've done like this, and we're nearly in an hour, and I don't think it'll ever change. You say, oh, let's try and do this in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, forget about it. Especially if you hit it off a bit, if you've got some kind of common ground, then it'll just take off, and an hour will be gone. So
it has been very fun having a conversation with you, and yeah, it has been already about an hour, hasn't it? It is tough that way because part of your mind is like, oh, I got to go back to work, but you don't get to always talk this much about stuff. So yeah, that must be tough, especially for you.
Well, considering the most the population biting the most on us is unfortunately the Americans, which means that everything has to be done for me kind of after hours. It kind of suits me because I'm quite busy during the day with other stuff, so it's actually kind of, from a time point of view, it's probably the best time for me anyway, but
you just maybe don't get quite enough sleep that way.
no, not really. I've got 3 young kids, so that's out the window anyway, it doesn't matter. Well, okay, then let's try and finish this quickly then. I'll give you, we'll try and do the quick fire as it's meant, and we'll actually try and do it a quick fire. So, favorite guitar maker?
Other than myself, obviously, which is, kind of, obviously I have to say that from a sales standpoint. But yeah, I would say it would be between what Sean May is making right now over at May Custom Basses, or Marlowe Basses. Really like what both of those guys are doing right now.
Favorite guitar effect?
Oh, geez. I'd have to say it's that boomerang looper that I've got right now. I love that thing.
Yeah. We're playing around with loopers quite a bit because the wee project that I'm running is, I've got some stuff myself, and I've got this an old friend of mine who I really respect a lot when it comes to musical stuff. And because we want to keep it absolutely, completely one guitar, one bass, and drums, and that's it. There are certain parts where we need to double things up, so we are playing around with loopers a wee bit. So it's a bit of a going topic at the moment. Shouldn't we? Which one? Well, we're using the Big Boss one, which is pretty nice, but it's huge. I mean, it's like a pedal board in itself. So I just want 2 dittos, to be honest, just 2 small dittos. Now I'm rambling. Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm exactly right there with you. It's hard to resist to go down that rabbit hole about the loopers with you.
Yeah. Favorite amp maker?
Oh, Ashdown.
That's weird. Why?
I hadn't learned a lot about Ashdown until I barely even heard one, frankly, until I got together with Jocko 3X, my endorsing artist. And since then, I've heard a few of them and got a chance to play with a few of them, and I just love the tone that they get. I really like the construction. They kind of hit that right. Jocko's into really aggressive music, and that's kind of what I enjoy playing the most. So they just really kind of fit my tastes really well.
Favorite music genre?
Oh gosh, my favorite genre. What would be it changes probably every year, but right now I'd have to say anything that's kind of avant-garde but still listenable at the same time. Maybe kind of electronica end of things right now. I'm not sure. I guess that it's an incomplete answer, but that's what I'd have to say for the moment.
Favorite band and artist? Well, you've mentioned Primus and Diabolical Samplatoon quite a few times, so I'm gonna take it those are the ones.
Probably a close second might have to be that guy, Bob Log the Third that I mentioned. Check that out, boys and girls. If you're listening, check out Bob Log the Third. He's awesome.
Bob Log the Third. Favorite
Yep.
guitarist? Must I rather ask favorite bassist?
Favorite guitarist would be Tosin Abasi, and then probably Les Claypool would still be my favorite bassist. Yeah, I'd have to say both of them.
And the obvious favorite instrument?
Yeah, of course, it would be bass guitar. Probably, I
Fretless
do
or not?
love. Oh, probably fretted just because I can't, I'm not quite good enough to like, my intonation's still a little off on fretless.
All right.
So I would probably be fretted. A close runner up, I suppose, would be any sort of bowed instrument. I really love the bowed instruments. They're very cool. If I had the time, I'd learn to play one.
Favorite drink?
Oh, one with booze in it?
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, sorry, I was asking. If it's
Oh yeah,
if it's
why not? Okay.
yeah, if it's
Well, you
if
said
it's
coffee.
without
Let's
yeah,
go
if it's
for the.
without if it's without booze, I'd have to say coffee. If it's with booze, I'd have to say a dirty martini.
Well, a friend of mine's dad, he used to get up in the morning and he used to make strong coffee and put at least 2 or 3 cups worth of brandy in it. So it could have been coffee with brandy too. You know.
Yes, that
I,
that is delicious. However, it slows me down a little bit if I'm going to drink it.
yeah, I never thought it was delicious, but maybe it's just because it's a bit too much. Maybe a half a cup or a cup, maybe.
It's an acquired taste, yeah.
Yeah. Favorite place, you know.
Oh, my favorite place. Probably, it would probably be Durango, where I am. I just love it here.
I need to
I am a
check on
big,
the map where it is in Colorado. I really do because
yeah, very, very southwestern corner of the state, right in the middle of the Rocky Mountains. I mean, you're virtually wherever you are in town, there is a mountain in any direction less than a mile away from you. It's amazing. It's beautiful.
that sounds very good. See, I'm a big fan of mountains or sea. It has to have one or the other. It's got to be either the sea or mountains, or ideally both. But you know,
Yeah, right. I kind of, yeah, we're missing the sea for sure. It would be. I'd really like to surf. So
But
that
you've
is
got
what
good
I'm
snow
missing.
in winter, don't you?
Yes, yeah, there's plenty of good snowboarding and skiing. We get that real powdery snow, and there's all kinds of ski resorts in the area, so it's great.
I mean, that kind of makes up for the lack of the ocean. So,
It does. It really does.
favorite food?
Um, I don't know if I have a particular favorite, but I really do like Thai food quite a bit.
You see why I do these interviews the way I do is because most of the people that you interview, even if it's smaller companies, it's pretty much still a person who is
Yeah,
pretty much 90% of that business. And that's what I think is so important about this and why I like this whole setup so much, because you're back to the days where you're buying from someone, you're not buying from a company. The internet has gone full circle from being very kind of impersonal, where the persona completely left the sphere, whereas now as a small business with some clever marketing and really real dedication and skill, you can compete again because the websites, YouTube, social media allows you to connect with people again, and they can buy from you again. You know, that's why I think this is kind of one of the reasons I like to structure these interviews in this way, because it needs to give a bit of a mix between the person at the helm as well as what they're actually producing and wanting to
and
get
it's
across.
always and it's always so fun to get to learn more about the people you're a fan of. You know, if I was, I mean, when I got into Carl Thompson's work, I looked around for everything I could about him and what he had done and all that kind of. I would have loved to know what his favorite food was and that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think people are going to be real interested in all the interviews you've got on your site.
Well, I hope so. We need to build them up. The more people that get interviewed, most likely, the more people will get interviewed. It's as simple as that. Anthony, I really appreciate the time you gave me here. This will take a couple of days before I'll have the video side of things up. If you have anything that you want to add to this, just send it to me in an email or send me some additional pictures. If you have got any videos that you want to put in the background of this, feel free, just send it to me, no problem. and we can sort that out. So it'll take a couple of days. Once it's all edited up, I will just put it on to YouTube, and I'll also embed it into the article so that it goes with the interview that you've already done, so it's more a complete picture. And then I'll just post it out on all the channels and make a big spiel about it as much as I can. And the more people obviously propagate it, the better. So if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye out, but I'll probably let you know anyway. So
Sounds like a plan, Helmut. And thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I've had a really great time. And like I said before, I'm gonna on a regular basis I'll post stuff on my social media about you and try to get more people coming to you, because I'm friends with tons of those boutique guys, and I'd love to help you expand a little bit.
I would absolutely appreciate it, even if it's just as simple as them starting to add their interviews to the site and starting some sort of conversation with me. That would already be more than I can ask for.
You got it.
Brilliant. Well, listen, you have a nice day / afternoon, or where are we? Yeah, afternoonish. And
yeah, it's about 3 o'clock here. Yeah.
yeah, very good. Well, look, thanks again. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to let you get on with things, and all the best to you. Yeah.
Thanks. Same to you, Helmut. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye. Bye.